Hi guys, this is Sonja here with Sci-Fi Adventures, and I want to thank you for joining me for this video. For those of you who've been following along, I have been narrating my science fiction story, Time Tracks, and in the last video we left off with Sophia, and she had just said, "You mean your watch stopped telling the time too? I don't understand what is happening." So I'm going to go ahead and just pick up right there in the story. The man's gray eyes softened at her distress, and he gestured to the empty space next to her on the big white rock. "Mind if I sit for a spell, miss?" Sophia nodded soberly, and he sat down looking pensive. "Did you pray for help, miss?" Sophia's eyes widened with astonishment, and she wondered now if this man was some sort of magician or mind reader. "As a matter of fact, I did pray, and well, to be perfectly honest, praying is not something I have done too much of in my life. How did you know I prayed?" Her heart started beating unbearably fast, and she suddenly grew lightheaded. Suddenly she did not want to hear his answer. Suddenly she wanted desperately to run away from him. But she was beginning to feel dizzy, as though she might faint. Seeing her distress, he quickly pulled a small canteen out of what seemed to be the limitless pockets of his overalls. He handed it to her and urged her to drink. "Please, miss, you need water." Sophia pushed away any misgivings she felt about taking the water from a stranger, and she drank gratefully. The dizziness subsided right away, and her head cleared a bit. Patting her reassuringly on the shoulder, he then handed her a clean white and beautifully embroidered handkerchief. She felt oddly soothed by the sight of it and pressed it to her eyes and cheeks. As she did this, her senses were pleasantly engulfed by the handkerchief's clean and soothing scent of lavender. There, Sophia. It's all going to work out just fine. You'll see. You just need to have a little faith. There's a train scheduled to arrive in a few minutes just at the base of the mountain." Sophia stared openly at him, shaking her head once again in disbelief. "Wait, how is it you know my name? There's a train coming here?" Incredulous, Sophia looked toward the base of the mountain, and sure enough, she could see now that there were train tracks. How had she not seen them before? She was stuttering now. "I don't understand." Suddenly, he slipped off the rock with an agility that surprised her. He then pulled out a single, shiny gold ticket from the initialed front pocket of his overalls and handed it to her. "Here is your train ticket, miss. I really must be on my way, but don't you worry because it's going to work out just fine." Sophia jumped up from the rock, seized with fear. "Oh, no, please don't go." Tears welled up instantly in her eyes, threatening to spill down her cheeks at the sight of him turning and ready to walk away in the direction of the mountain. Sophia yelled out after him, "Oh, please, don't go, at least not yet. I need to ask you something before I can decide whether or not to board this train that you say is coming." He stopped walking and turned fully around to face her before smiling a reassuring smile. Sophia noticed just the hint of a knowing twinkle in his eye and felt inexplicably relieved and less afraid. "Please do ask, miss." Sophia struggled for a moment, working up the courage to continue, for she was well aware of the highly unusual circumstances she now found herself in, and she was starting to believe that this kind stranger was much more than he appeared to be. In fact, the thought of who he might be brought an unexpected twinge of returning fear to her, but she quickly shook it off, certain that this kind man was a friend, and so she continued. "When Daniel broke off our engagement, for one of the most awful reasons imaginable, by the way, betrayal," and here she had to stop a moment to catch her breath, shook anew by the awful truth of it. "Well, I thought my life was over, but then this happened. And at a loss to adequately explain the unbelievable events of the day, she chose instead to wave at the broad expanse of majestic scenery all around them, including the mountain. Well, the thing is, and I do apologize for this because you've been so kind, but I'm still not entirely sure you are real. I mean, after all, you could be a figment of my imagination or a hallucination. However, even as she said these words, they sounded hollow and unconvincing to her. She well knew how very real every aspect of what was happening felt to her. Slightly anxious, she chewed at her lip, a bit embarrassed now at having said so much out loud. But she was determined, in spite of her discomfort, to say everything that was on her mind. I'm just suddenly not sure of anything at all. I thought my life was set and things made sense, but now here I am at this crossroads, or time portal as you have called it, which I have to say is still a very hard thing to believe could be true, and I don't know what to do. So this is what I wanted to ask you before you go, before I decide whether to get on board this train or not. Suddenly, and in a manner very much akin to a train conductor, TC raised his hand before she could ask the question and gestured for her to stop. His kind gray eyes searched her face intently. Miss Sophia, I do reckon you're going through a lot of emotions right now. Folks don't always decide to board the train. Some turn back, and I just want you to know they always find their way back to their once familiar surroundings again. And you can do that too. It's entirely your choice, Miss Sophia. You can keep going on into the unknown, or you can choose to go back to what is familiar. It's up to you. I just wanted to be sure you knew that, miss, before you asked your question. Sophia's heart fluttered in her chest, and she swallowed hard, not ashamed to admit that she was nervous and scared to hear the answer, but finally ready and able to ask the question. Well, here is my question. I wanted to know, would I be able to come back here again? I mean, back to my home here someday if I decide to get on the train. TC smiled his big, broad, comforting smile at her again, and once again, relief flooded through her at the sight of it. His eyes seemed to be twinkling more than ever as he answered her. Why, yes, Miss Sophia, you most certainly can, but chances are you probably won't want to. At least that's how most folks wind up feeling when destiny calls. And that does conclude this 5th installment of Time Tracks. It also concludes the first chapter of When Destiny Calls. And so I do hope you've been enjoying the story, and I hope you will be sure to stay tuned here to the Sci-Fi Adventures channel for more of Time Tracks. In my next video, I'll be starting the 2nd chapter, which is called Answering the Call. So again, thank you for joining me, and I do look forward to being back with you again very soon with more of Time Tracks and more sci-fi adventures.